All right, guys and gals, we're going to work on caping a deer out right quick here with the focus on around the face and the antler area, and cut the skull cap off. With the new CWD regulations in the state of Arkansas, and with them expanding the counties and a possible tier system, it's going to be difficult to get your deer to your taxidermy of choice without crossing county lines. And the issue of bringing deer across from Oklahoma or Missouri or any kind of a state line into the state of Arkansas is also an issue. So a lot of customers get into the discussion with me on how to cape out the face, and I tell them it's really simple, but it intimidates people. So we're going to work on that just a bit. As far as all the regulations with CWD, just get with the Game and Fish website and you'll be able to get any information you want with that. We're going to focus on taxidermy caping only. I'm not going to spend any time today worrying about deboning or butchering and all those kind of things. So we're going to get started here. We'll go through this a little bit. I'm going to have this camera on my head so that it's looking where I'm seeing, and we'll go from there. First thing we're going to have is a decent knife. A lot of folks use scalpels. I like a sharp knife, a little less sharp than a scalpel, so I don't make nicks and cuts into the skin. Also, you're probably going to need a sawzall. So before you watch this video, though, this is going to be somewhat graphic at times. If you get a little queasy about seeing parts of inside of the brain, matter of fact, and around the eyes, this probably isn't the video for you to watch. So be sure you're censoring who's watching it. It might freak them out a little bit. The next thing is you're going to need a sawzall. I use a battery-powered sawzall to cut the skull cap off, and that way when you bring your antlers and your cape to your taxidermist, he's already been, the brain matter is not attached. You have no bone. All you got is antlers and cape to bring to your taxidermist. So I'm going to go over a couple quick things before we get into the caping part of this, and we'll get things worked out and get started. So the first thing I want to show before it gets into the caping, a lot of mistakes are made, and it makes your taxidermy jobs absolutely horrible. You can see on this deer, the customer did a good job. There's the two front legs, here's the pits for the front shoulders, and right back here is where they stopped cutting, so that we're not getting any incisions up through here. You see there's a little spot right there that something went wrong with it, but that's easy for us to fix. A lot of times people cut plumb up to here, and then we have to sew all this, or they cut at an angle and over like this, and it causes hours and hours worth of repair work. And most taxidermy shops are charging extra for that kind of repair work, and we all know that taxidermy can be a little pricey, so you need to kind of prevent that. So enough about that. So when you're skinning your deer out, let's stop back here by the breastbone, and don't go any further than that, and you'll always be okay. So the next thing you got to worry about is how long your neck is from this point to this point. Some people bring in deers that have their neck plumb back to here because they're worried about messing up their cape. If the shorter this neck portion is here, the less of a seam we have to sew all the way down. If you got your neck plumb back to here and we can't get the hide off of it for whatever reason, then it makes it, we have to sew. You have a sew mark from this antler all the way back to the end of your deal. So the least amount of sewing is the prettier your deer is going to be, and less apt to see some sort of a seam or hair standing up that we have to really work with. So when you skin it all the way back, you can see that I've already taken the time before this video started to skin this neck all the way back to the base of the skull, okay? And that way we're not having a big seam at that way. So what I like to do is I like to make a mark right here in the hide, so I know where that incision is, or where I can stop when I make the incision up top. So we're going to get that located. So we're going to have about that much of a seam to sew. You're going to need a little bit of room for getting it stretched around the horns anyhow. So check with your taxidermist. There's a couple different ways to start this process. There's what's called the Y cut, and there's also what's called the T cut. So basically, you're going to, with a T cut, you're going to come from the base of this antler to the base of this antler, and then you're going to bring a straight line with your knife down around to wherever the end of your neck is. A lot of taxidermists use the Y cut. Same thing. You start at the base of this antler and you come at this angle, and you start at this base of this antler and you come at this angle, and then you turn and you come straight down to wherever you're going to have the end of your neck. So you just need to kind of check to see what their style is. I like the Y cut. It's called a short Y when we're about this distance, and it makes things easier. But one of the first tricks you got to do is get started, and what you don't want to do is take the knife and start cutting like this. What you're going to do when you do that is cut the hairs off. You can see how long these hairs are, and they lap over each other. So when you decide to start cutting like that, it's going to cut those hairs. And then when we have to do repair work, or we're going to have to sew this up before the deer's mounted. And if the hairs are cut off short, then it won't overlap and cover up the seam very well. So what we're going to do, we're going to take the knife or your scalpel, whatever, and we're going to come right up to the inside of that burr, okay? And once you get it started, you need to rotate your knife in that kind of a fashion so that the blade and the knife is underneath the skin. And then you can cut, insert your cut, whether it's your T cut or your Y cut, right back to the center, okay? And then we're going to do the same thing here. Remember to rotate that knife and get the blade underneath the skin, and that way it's up, and then you can just walk the blade back to where your other cut was. So you can see right off the bat I got a V shape right here, so you can start skinning this back just a little bit. Right now it's not too big of a deal, but when you start getting around thin areas and stuff like that, you need to be really careful with your knife. We're going to, even the taxidermists make holes from time to time, and but the less amount of holes is the less amount of sewing, the more pretty your deer will be. And when we go to having to sew up a bunch of stuff, sometimes, especially on early summer deer, the hair is really short, and it's hard to cover up. So you can see what I'm doing. I'm taking that knife, it's upside down, and I'm walking right around that antler burr with that. You can use a screwdriver for this and put pressure on it, and it works well also. I've just come accustomed to doing it with a knife. And so you can see where I bring that knife right up that bone of that skull, right up to the base of those antlers. We try not to leave any hair attached to the burrs. We want it on the hide. That way we can fill that gap when we get to the point of putting this dude back together here after a while. So once you get going just a little bit here, you don't want to try to go all the way around the antlers just yet. You need some relief. All this skin's going to be tight, so once you get it laid out like that, that's a good time to stop. And then we can come back here and we can get right underneath the skin again, and then we're going to make that V into a Y. Okay, we want this cut to be straight as possible. I've seen it come across at angles and stuff like that. Man, it makes our deer less attractive when we're not doing a good job of staying in straight lines and such. All right. So you can see now I've got the Y cut here. All right. So once you get to that point, it's just like skinning out the rest of your animal. We're going to get into some critical areas here in a little bit, but right away here we're not going to. When we get up around the eyes and the nose and those kind of things, try not to just butcher, because every time you make a swipe, you cut hair off, and you make that hair short. It's just like what I was saying earlier. We depend on as taxidermists to keep the hairs long, so we can overlap the hairs in their natural position, so that It's not a, we can cover up any kind of a sole, or if there's a scar we have to cut out and those kind of things. We absolutely depend 100% on the hairs being at full length the best we can. It's not always going to happen. Even we make crucial mistakes with that kind of stuff. So now I've kind of got that started a little bit. You can see this is the ear butt area. You can see where the ear's coming up and joining the skull. We want to get a little relief there, so we're not tugging on stuff that's not going to move. So we're going to work on this antler burr on the back side now. You can see I'm just working it straight up, right up that bone to the bottom of that burr. And if you didn't do this, if you don't do this at critical times, then you're pulling against all the skin that is still attached. Okay, so here's where once I've got all this flat and I got all this back here behind me, so now I can, right next to the skull, here's the ear butt, and I've already cut a little bit of it there. So we want to go right next to the skull and just cut straight down. Be careful not to get too aggressive there, and just, if you got a real sharp knife, you could cut and have the hole in the skin all the way around. So you can see there's the ear canal going into the skull. So once we get that kind of started, see we got all kinds of room to pull here. It's kind of getting tight back here a little bit. For the lack of time, I'm gonna go ahead and make that Y cut just a little bit longer so that I got some relief, so I don't run out of battery or card on my camera. The more meat we can get off of it, the better off. We're going to have to scrape the deer anyhow. So, but I mean, it keeps everything down, time-wise and everything else down. If we're doing a good job when we're working on skinning these dudes out, so that we're not having to spend that extra 5 or 10 minutes every time there's a big chunk of meat on the hide. But we know it's just not possible at times. We do the same thing as everybody else does. We make mistakes, and we try to fix those mistakes and work right up to them and go from there. So we get it. Just the more damage that is done to a deer, the more money it costs your taxidermist. And if you continue to bring customers continue to bring deer in that has to do a lot of repair, then it's going to make the taxidermist naturally go up in prices, because we're having to cover our expenses and our time, and it makes it difficult at times. I talked to another taxidermist today, and we all got stories where people have brought deer in where we had 3 hours worth of sewing to do on top of the normal mounting of a deer, and that really just, it puts us in a bad mood, and makes our job harder, and we're trying to get things out as quickly as possible. Sometimes you just got to rotate around, get that head to where, however you work the best. You know, right-handed people do things different than left-handed people. One of the guys in the region that is a taxidermist, he's left-handed, and he runs into all kinds of issues. He's had to modify his own tools and stuff, and when they make stuff, they don't consider about left-handed people sometimes. Not every tool, but a lot of tools that way. So you can see I've cut right up to that burr. I tried to do a little better job this time, or sorry, the ear butt, so we didn't cut it all the way through at that point. You don't want to be pulling tight here, because if you get too tight, then you're going to cut a hole right through the skin. Alright, so I've got some relief there with the skin. I'm going to come right back here and work around this burr just a little bit more. I hope this camera's positioned right, because I got no way to check it as I'm going. So now then, I've got my area there, some relief area, so I got something to pull on, and and tug on those kind of things. And right here's the ear butt where we was at over here earlier. So we're going to go straight down beside that skull, and you'll see there's the ear canal again. And man, once you get past that, as far as the neck and the back of the head, it really flies. Remember, try to get right up next to them burrs, okay, so that we're not leaving much, if any, hair on the burr itself. It makes a cleaner mount. And what some people don't realize is the skin, when it dries, it's like leather, and it's wet when we dry it, so it draws up like leather when it dries. So sometimes we get skin to move while we're in the drying phase, and we all target that. We don't want that stuff. We don't want it happening at all. And any taxidermist that's got any sense will guard against any kind of a draw where the skin's going to draw and pull against things. You can see that I'm working right up next to this eye. When I get to that eye, I want to stop for a little bit. I want to get all this hide on down and around so that I'm not pulling against this, trying to get this around the eye. This is a crucial area. This eye is. We got the eyebrows and the eyelids and everything else here that we have to make your deer beautiful. And there's also a very deep canal right here. It's the tear duct, and we need to, sometimes a lot of the deers that we get in that customers do, there's a big old hole right here, and it's because people aren't guarding against that. So we got the eyelids and the eyelashes, and we don't want to cut none of that stuff. Got to watch the back corner of this eye right here. A lot of times that'll get nicked, and we have to sew that, and to make that where it looks natural and pretty sometimes is a little bit on the difficult side, and we want things to be right for the customer. So I'm going to come back here. I'm going to finish dressing this hide down and around the back side of this neck. Trying to be very careful. If you got a real bloody deer, you want to try to clean it just a little bit so you can see where you're at. Sometimes we get in here and, you know, we do this all the time, so we kind of know where the landmarks are and those kind of things. But if you're not very efficient at skinning, or you've doing this for your first time or two, sometimes it's hard to see exactly what's going on. This deer just is still a little bit on the frozen side on the back side. A customer just brought this in a couple of days ago. I will tell you that right now he's about right, but sometimes if you get a deer that's frozen and you start trying to trim him out too early, it's so easy to nick the skin. You can see I'm just kind of taking my time, working on around. I want to get all this back around there so we can work on the detail on that face, because the face is the shortest hair on the deer, and when you make damaging marks on that, it takes some taxidermy skills to patch all that up and make it look right, so that we're not handing the customer a deer with a whole bunch of scars and stuff that we cause. Now, some deers just have scars. We all know they fight, and there's problems amongst all that. That's just stuff we have to deal with as taxidermists. But if we can all join together and get the customer base to try to do a little better job at this point, and it'll help us out. And the main thing is the purpose of this video is so that we can get the customers that live in the CWD hot zones to be able to get their deer legal, to be able to go across state lines and or county lines, and it'll make their life easier. They worry about it so much, and so do we. You know, I travel into those counties and those hot zones quite a bit, and I'll do this on the tailgate of my truck, trying to help the customer out, so that we're staying legal with the CWD rules and the Game and Fish. So you can see right here, here's the orbital bone on this deer. This is where the eye lids all attach. It's right in here. Okay, you can see that right here is the corner of the eye. If I put my finger in there, you can see me pushing that up right there. Okay, well, your finger in there is a good tool. Okay, so if you use the tool, use your finger, and you know where your finger's at. Now you got to be cautious here until you get used to it. You don't want to cut your finger, and that's kind of the purpose of putting your finger in there, is because you're going to pretty much know where the finger's at. Okay, so we want to cut slowly right there, and as we're cutting, we want to pull up on our eyelids or our eye socket. Okay, and now see, I've cut this up, and right there is that back corner of that eye I told you that sometimes gets cut and it's hard for us to fix. So that's just the membrane that comes around the eye, the connective tissue. Okay, once we're beyond that back corner, then we can just follow the bone just a little bit, and I'll follow that bone right around. You can see right here, here's the eyelids, here's the nictitating membrane. You don't have to worry about that. We're going to rebuild that in your deer. Now you can see I'm still just kind of tugging back and pulling back. We don't want to sever the skin or get too aggressive right here. This is the part that people freak out about when it comes time for them to do it themselves. Again, I was getting a little tight, so I'm pulling back, skinning down just a little bit so that I can have some pull skin and not worry about having to tug against everything else, because this right here is one of the crucial parts about caping a face out. So we don't want to get past this bone just yet. We want to go ahead and get this connective tissue out of the way. Okay, you see that kind of broke free there. All right, so right here is where that notch is. Okay, and this is where the bone actually V's in like this. So if you come down through there with your knife just straight, man, you're going to cut a hole about the size of a quarter in there, sometimes about the size of $50, and it becomes a little bit of an issue to fix. We all got skills to do that, but if we can prevent it, we're going to do that. So we're going to come right down this eye orbital bone right here. We're going to get the skin disconnected from the orbital bone. You can see that. Just very small cuts, and you can see now the orbital bone is completely exposed. So here's where that V is. So I'm going to take this knife, and very easily I'm going to follow that bone right down and around. If you need to cut some more relief, that's always good. The more relief you got, the better off this all works out. So if you can come right down through there, and then some deer you can just finish out like that. And some deer, depending on how deep, and I guess it has to do with their age and how deep that gets. But then we want to follow the bone up here too. Okay, you can see that is a big deep V right there, and if you're not paying attention right here, all you got to do is follow the bone. It's really, really easy. Keep the skin pulled back. Look, see how tight that's getting right there? Because I'm pulling on it, so get that cut free. All right. Don't tug against things you don't need to tug against, trying to do a delicate area like this. All right. So I'm beyond that point. You can see how deep this divot is right here, and if I was to cut through there, I have a big old hole. So we'll dress this down just a little bit. We're going to jump back on that in just a moment. So we're going to go over here and take care of this other eye right quick. Same thing goes. I'm going to reach up in here. I need to cut a little bit of relief right here so that we're up against that bone. You can see the orbital bone starts right there. Once you get to that point, you need to stop your cutting and be prepared to, because if you cut too far right there, you'll cut that back corner of that eyelid, and you will cut the eyelids off, the eyelashes and everything else. And I'm telling you, You can have the prettiest, best deer in the world, but if it ain't got no eyelashes, you can sure tell the difference. And we try to fix all that, but sometimes it's just not fixable. And so if we can do a good job, so can you. See, I got my finger in that hole. You can see the eyelashes and eyelids and all those kind of things. We're going to come right around. Same thing we did earlier. We're going to come right down to that V. You can see there's the nictitating membrane again. Again, we don't need that. We're going to build a new one for him when we get ready to finish him out. So here I am. All right, there's where that orbital bone comes and connects here. Okay, you can see where the nictitating membrane was not attached. No big deal. We're not going to need it. We're not causing a hole. So we're going to break this from the orbital bone, because if you don't detach that, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to pull. So we're going to cut some freedom here, some relief. All right. So now then, we're back to the same thing. You kind of got to be. You can see how I'm holding the knife a different way than what you're accustomed to. It's all right. You just kind of, these things just don't lay perfectly every time. You see I'm following that bone right there. All right. I'm going to come right over here. Do the same thing. Be sure don't get your knife up at the angle like this, because you'll cut that. It's very thin skin right there. You can see that bone is just right there, and if you don't cut up against it, you're going to cut a hole. And I've had people call me and say, hey, I want to mount my deer, and I want to skin it out. How do I skin it out? And I'll tell them, and then they'll call and tell me they're going to do a European mount because they cut a big old hole in the front of that face. Happens all the time. Heck, sometimes we even do it as taxidermists. We can't blame nobody else then. We don't get a lot of deers in that's done like this unless they're coming from different states. This works on everything. This system will work on an elk, any kind of a critter, moose, antelopes. You know, if you go kill exotics, it's the same exact system. You just kind of got to pay attention and work around as you go. Again, this is not something you want to do very fast. We do it pretty fast because time is money, and we do it a lot, and so it's not a big deal for us. But you guys don't want to be doing it very fast. That way we don't make huge mistakes. You can see I'm just falling right down the side of that face. You've heard me say it a zillion times in this video. I'm about getting plenty of relief because we're fixing to work on the lips, and we don't want to cut the lips off either. We need the lips to make this work right, to make your deer look right. So we're going to just put some pressure against it until we get to a certain point here, and you can see how spongy that is right there. Just about any time right in here. I like to work it out really far. You can go ahead and just cut down in there, and you can see this is the upper jaw, and this is the lower jaw. And we just cut this back. All this material here, we're not going to need it, but we want to work right down to the jawbone. You can see right there is the jawbone. All right. We're going to work right up next to it. Same thing up here. We're going to work right down to where the upper jawbone connects to the skin. we're going to cut back any material that we're not going to need the first day we work on it. So don't worry about bringing this deer with too much stuff. Now, that being said, one of the deals that it's amazing to me, I'd rather it happen than people to do it wrong, but man, if you're going to do a shoulder mount, and no matter what you're going to do, full sneak, semi-sneak, whatever, I don't need the tail or anything back there in the back end of that deer. You know, it's good to leave the cape long, but we're going to have to cut that off and throw it away anyhow. And sometimes in the fleshing point, it's a problem. So we get too much skin, and we're having to deal with it. All right, so I've come down quite a ways here, but you can see this got really soft right here. That is the cartilage inside the nose, and I've already made a cut there. You can see here's the upper lip line, and this is the inside of the nose right here. So we want to be sure and come follow that on around. Here's the nose pad on the outside, and we don't want to cut that either. I mean, think about it. The first thing you see on a deer, when somebody mounts it for you, is the nose. I know that the antlers are all pretty and all that kind of stuff, but the nose is the first thing you bump into. So here's the cartilage. We want to just kind of follow the bone a little bit. You'll feel it's really rigid there and really rigid there. We don't want to just leave as much as this as possible. We're going to, like I said earlier, we're going to trim away anything we're not going to need. Got a little bit right there. So we're going to do the same thing right over here. We're going to follow this around. And again, cautious with your knife, because you see you can get really close right here, and this material here is stuff we need to make your deer pretty. And there's some more of that cartilage. Alright. Follow that lip line right around to the tip of the nose. Again, we want to be cautious right here and do not cut the pad off. Alright. So you can see I got the entire nose pad, the entire buildup on the inside of the nose, and then we'll fix the rest of that on the way out. Okay? So then we can just finish the bottom. Come right, follow that bone line. Sometimes we get in a hurry right here, and we'll make a little nick right in here, and because we see the end, and when you make that little nick, we got to sew that up, and that's really short white hair, and sometimes it's just a little bit difficult to fix and cover up. When we get her done, it's just one of them jobs. Okay, so here I am. I got the entire face skinned out. Okay, at this point you don't have to do nothing more with the ears. Just bring that to your taxidermy shop. Okay, there's my nose. I got my lip line all the way around. Okay, no nicks in the lip line and all those kind of things. That's what we're after. You can see there's the eyelashes and the eyelids and all these pretty little hairs everywhere. And this skin right here is very important to us. It's very smooth. There's not any hair on that. And when we have to repair that, it kind of makes it ugly a little bit. Okay, there's that notch I was talking about, and no holes. So that's what we're desired after there. So what you want to do is you want to roll this hide up. If it's going to be a while, before you get it to your taxidermist, go ahead and roll that dude up and get it in the freezer. So bacteria is what makes hair slip off, and we want to prevent any of that. Today's really warm, so I won't mess around with that much at all. But now we're going to cut this antler cap off, and it's going to be a little noisy when I do the sawzall, but I'm going to show you two parts of this. Is number one, we're going to make a cut with our sawzall right above these orbital bones. Okay, and then when we get it down to a certain point, then we're going to come back and we're going to cut at this angle. Okay, and I'll show you how to do that. And the reason we do that, if you look at this form here, this is the first cut I was telling you about, right behind the orbital bone, and this is the second cut. It don't matter how much of that bone you got left over. we're going to be able to trim it and make it fit the form. But you can see all these forms are already pre-cut in that angle, so it's good just to get kind of close. We're not going to be after you to make sure that that's exact. But the hide's off, so that's now CWD cross county line legal. Nothing else on there has to be removed. Okay, but the one thing that you can't deal with across county lines and state lines in the state of Arkansas, especially in the CWD hot zones, is brain matter, spinal, bone, anything like that. So you got to have all that removed. There's one section of bone you're allowed to keep, and I'll show you that in just a moment. Now this is where things get a little graphic and a little bit noisy, so if you're queasy about things, this is time to not pay attention or just toughen up a little bit. It'll be all right. All right, so it's gonna be a little noisy, bear with me. About that far is all you got to go. It would have been a brilliant idea if I'd have put a sharp Sawzall blade in. Made that a little bit, less difficult to cut. But it's going to be all right. So right here is a bunch of meat, and it's not a big deal. You can follow this skull plate right back through here. If you don't have to do this, but I find that it's easier. It don't fight the Sawzall blade very often. You can see there's a little bit of a break over right there. Alright, so I'll get the meat kind of cut back. Makes it easier because the meat tends to grab the Sawzall blade. Here we go, we're going to get a little noisy again. Okay, so that's now to be discarded in your CWD zone. That part of the deer cannot be brought out of your CWD zone or across state lines into the state of Arkansas whatsoever. And that goes for any cervid, elk, moose, anything that grows antlers yearly. And that part can be tossed away. Follow your regulations. I'm sure they're going to work on that a little bit more as we go, trying to combat the CWD thing in our state. So follow your regulations and be sure you're discarding it properly so you don't get in trouble for that. Also, taxidermists, we generally send it to facilities that are governed, that allow us to get rid of the potential CWD stuff. Even if we're not in a CWD zone, you have to be mindful of that stuff because we don't know if a deer's sick or not. So we're going to peel that brain right out of that. Okay. I'm going to turn around over here so you're not staring at that old nasty skull the whole time with the brain sitting on top of it. I like to get all this, as much of this meat off of here as you can. It's not required by the CWD's rules. That the brain is what's important to get off there. Okay, and but while I'm here, I'm just going to dress this up a little bit. Figured I would have to go get a band-aid since I was videoing myself. I cut myself doing this all the time, so be careful with that. Alright, so last thing we need to worry about for CWD regulations, and I don't think it's in there, but I can tell you that this is the connective tissue that protects that brain. It's a little sac that protects the brain from bouncing off the skull all the time. It's got all kinds of functions, and but I'm going to get that out of there. And sometimes I should have grabbed you grab it with a pair of pliers and it generally just pulls right out. And there we have it. It's now gone also. So that there is a CWD legal skull plate that you can now bring across your county line or your state lines from or into CWD zones. This is the only part of the skull that is legal to bring across those lines. And So it makes it easy. You can see it's not a difficult process. It takes just a little bit of time. You can do a deer in 15 minutes. We do it much faster than that, but like again, time is money. So put that dude up somewhere, and if it's going to be a little bit, you can get some feed salt or something to put on it, start drying the skull out. But you can bring that straight to us just like that, and we're going to take care of cleaning the rest of it up. And same with the hide, we'll get all that taken care of. That's an awesome looking Benton County buck, and I thank the customer for bringing that in late a little bit. So okay, so we're going to wrap up here, and thanks for watching this. And if I can help out, just leave me some comments. And if you need us, Rockin Taxidermy is located right here at Lowell, Arkansas, right on beautiful Beaver Lake. And you're welcome to bring me anything you can. If you still don't feel comfortable with cutting that out, then give me a holler and I'll come meet you. Thank you again.